A lot to discuss here, including a potential ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Do want to bring in a friend of the show here, Alex Trayman, the CEO and Jerusalem bureau chief at the Jewish News Syndicate. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Josh, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. And I do want to start off by talking about the fact that today does mark 600 days since those hostages were taken on October 7th of 2023. So did you think that here 600 days later, we would still be waiting for nearly 60 of those hostages to be released?
Well, just 2 days ago, we celebrated Jerusalem Day, which was the reunification of Jerusalem in the Six-Day War. And everybody wants there to be a Six-Day War. And here we are now at 600 days. It's been a long and a difficult and methodical struggle for the IDF. Elongated for two main reasons. Number one, because of the lack of weapons that were flowing to Israel under the Biden administration, and two, giving the time and space for negotiations to bring hostages home. And Israel has succeeded to bring 197 of the 251 hostages back, 148 alive. But as you mentioned, still 600 days later, and at least 20 living hostages still in Gaza.
I want to talk about the potential ceasefire deal because there's conflicting reports about a deal between Israel and Hamas. We had Reuters that was saying that Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Middle East envoy, had actually brokered a deal that Hamas said it would agree to. Israel kind of hinted, when you talk about Netanyahu, that there could potentially be some kind of deal or an announcement in the next day or two, then kind of walked that back. So there's a lot going on here. Do we know anything about if there is an actual deal that could be coming?
Well, Israel's certainly willing to engage in a deal that will bring back all the living hostages. They've said that they would be willing to agree to a deal that would bring 10 of the 20 living hostages home up front, and then the remaining 10 at the end of the conclusion of the deal. Hamas said that they had agreed to the Witkoff formula. What they had offered was half of what I just discussed, 5 up front and 5 later, still leaving 10 hostages in Gaza after an elongated ceasefire. But Steve Witkoff seemed to put ice on this as well, saying that what Hamas had offered was nothing like the deal that he had put on the table, and that we've seen this happen before, where Hamas basically says that they accept a deal that they are proposing in order to put more pressure on Israel. But both Israel and Witkoff saying that no deal has been reached at this point.
I know you and I have discussed this in the past, but I do want to get your take now, as we've heard a lot from President Trump over the last several months regarding the war in Gaza. What sort of pull, what sort of power does the U.S. and President Trump have over Israel when it comes to accepting any kind of deal? Can the U.S. force Israel to accept a deal that the U.S. wants?
Well, the U.S. has a significant leverage over Israel, and specifically with regard to the provision of the weapons that Israel needs to fight this war. I think that it needs to be understood that it's Israel is the one that's more insistent on doing whatever it can to get back the hostages, even more so than the United States. And the current incursion into Gaza has been strategically discussed at length with the Trump administration. They have agreed on Israel's strategic path. They've agreed on the timing, and the United States has provided the weapons for this latest operation in the Gaza Strip. But at the same time, the Trump administration trying to pay lip service to other nations around the world that want the hostages to be the only issue that Israel's dealing with. But there's a lot of coordination between Israel and the United States right here. And even though the U.S. has a lot of leverage, the U.S. is providing Israel with the weapons and with the space to do what they need to do to remove Hamas from power.
And I did want to ask about the new humanitarian aid efforts that are officially underway now. Do they appear that they've been better, that things are working better than they have in the past? Is it about the same, or are we seeing, much of the same problem? Because we know that gunshots have been fired. You have people that have been executed by Hamas as a result. So how are things kind of operating there when it does come to the humanitarian efforts?
Yeah, I mean, the situation in Gaza is horrible. Gazans don't have a place to live. There's no economy, and people are relying on humanitarian aid. There's now a new system in place with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a U.S.-backed agency set up. I can't say that it looks like it's working as well or better than before, but we still haven't even seen all the distribution points come online yet. What this new arrangement does is it cuts Hamas out of the process. And Israel's goal right now is to remove Hamas not only as a military threat to Israel, but also as a political force in Gaza. And whoever's controlling the humanitarian aid is basically controlling the economy of Gaza. So Israel doesn't want Hamas to have their hands on it. And that's why it's important for this American-backed initiative to come in and to be distributing aid directly to the people, so they can't be hijacked by Hamas.
And you are taking a live look right now over one of the many cameras that we have in Gaza. We have the border, and then we have kind of the interior here as the war does continue. Specifically, this is over in Khan Yunis at this hour. One thing I did want to ask you about, because there's been some buzz on social media, what do we know about the new unmanned marine vessels that are being used by the Israeli Navy? Do they play any sort of role in this war with Hamas? And what about the other battles with Hezbollah and the Houthis?
Well, Israel, one of its largest borders is with the Mediterranean Sea, and also in the Mediterranean Sea are significant natural gas deposits, including some that are already online, others that are not yet online. Israel's energy coming from natural gas that is offshore, and it's really important for Israel to be able to protect that. Those gas rigs were considered to be major targets during Israel's conflict with Hezbollah, which is now calmed significantly. I think that with regard to what's going on inside Gaza right now, that relies much more on manpower and Air Force, but we see that unmanned vehicles, including ATVs, which are used to go into dangerous areas and have been exploded in streets and set off charges that were placed actually by Hamas in order to booby trap buildings, have been very important component in saving lives. And obviously the unmanned air vehicles, some of which can drop ordnances that are precision guided on targets in a way that reduces collateral damage, have been very, very important. And it's just another demonstration of the technological superiority of Israel's military.
My last question for you, and as I always mention, there are a lot of developments that are happening pretty much on a daily basis. We know that Israel and Syria appear to be holding some direct talks that are happening right there at the border. What does that say, and what do we really know about the talks?
Well, I think this is a direct result of the president's diplomacy on his recent trip. And the president met in Saudi Arabia with al-Shara, who's the new de facto head of Syria, part of this Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's group that formerly was associated with al-Qaeda, but deposed Bashar Assad. They had been pushing down towards the south in the Israeli border. They had threatened the Druze community in southern Syria, and there are hundreds of thousands of Druze in Israel as well. And we started to see how Israel was pushing back and demonstrating that any attacks on Druze would be considered an attack on Israel, and that any movements towards the south of the country would be considered a trigger for an Israeli response. Trump released the sanctions on Syria because they're desperate for aid. And one of Trump's conditions was that Syria should start to normalize relations with Israel. And it's not going to be a full normalization agreement right now, but certainly deconfliction mechanisms in place, because if this group will move down towards Israel, Israel is promising to respond harshly. And we already saw Israel basically take out the entirety of the Syrian military, the planes, the ships, the tanks, immediately after Bashar Assad was deposed.
All right, Alex Traiman, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and break it all down. Anything else you want to add about any of the topics that we've covered? There have been quite a few, but anything you want to add before I let you go?
Well, it's certainly been a tough go diplomatically for Israel right now, and there's a lot of domestic challenges against Netanyahu as well. But the most important thing for the prime minister is the support of the president of the United States, and there are many, both on the Israeli left and even on the American right, that are trying to project a rift between Netanyahu and Trump, trying to make Trump angry at Netanyahu. But the two sides are working very, very closely together, and particularly in this new incursion into Gaza. This is very strongly coordinated between the two sides. And yet the most important issue, of course, will be what happens with negotiations with Iran over their nuclear facilities. And it's very likely that within several weeks from now, we're going to have a lot more clarity about what the future of this conflict is going to look like, and if there will be a military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities.
All right, Alex Trayman, thank you so much, as always, for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.